This video was brought to you by this post. Okay, so I came across a WarFrame subreddit post where someone paid a whopping 500 plat for prime cryo rounds. Now, I think everyone here already knows that that is really high. So I wanted to do a video basically explaining how to really easily get a lot of the more commonly traded items that are available in trade chat, as well as the WarFrame market, as well as basically what you should be looking out for with regards to potential scams from other players. So let's begin. When people ask me how much an item should be sold for, I look at WarFrame.market. WarFrame.market is a website that I use quite a lot when it comes to just general trading, but also I use it as a way to give me an indicator of what the market value of something actually is. With the exception of Rivens, I find that this particular website is very trustworthy and very reliable, because you're literally just looking at all the sales of that item to see what the price actually is for people who are trying to sell it at this particular moment in time. You can also have a look at the purchase requests as well. There might be some interesting information there to see like what people are trying to ask for as opposed to what people are trying to sell for. So we'll see how we go from there. Now let's go through some commonly traded items. We'll first start off with prime mods. So the very genesis of this video, prime mods can be obtained relatively easily depending on when you're playing, as in what day you're playing and what week you're playing, as well as how long you've actually been playing this game. Prime Fury, Prime Vigor, Prime Shred, and Prime Sure-Footed, they are only available by playing for a few years in this game, and jokes, they're not even tradable anyway, so we're not going to worry about them too much. But with all of the other Prime mods, Prime Cryo Rounds, you know, Prime Ravage, Prime Blunderbuss, I believe is a thing as well, Prime Fast Reload, or whatever the bloody hell that is. You know, all these other Prime mods, they're also available from Barracuteer's shop, which is precisely why you don't need to be spending 500 plat for them. So sometimes he will bring different Prime mods together. Sometimes I think he doesn't bring a single one, but usually he will bring something of that nature for his shop. Of course, if you happen to have missed specifically the week that Barra brought along Prime Cryo Rounds, for example, you're probably not going to be seeing him bring Prime Cryo Rounds for quite some time. But it's not an infinite amount of time. There is a cap at the amount of time that you will have to wait before Barracuteer brings Prime Cryo Rounds, and that is specifically until the next TennoCon, because when TennoCon happens, Barracuteer will bring along to the TennoCon Digital Relay his shop where he just sells everything he's ever sold. So for example, if you've missed Prime Cryo Rounds and then you find out that TennoCon is coming about a few weeks later, well, guess what? You're going to be able to get Prime Cryo Rounds a few weeks later, provided, of course, you buy the TennoCon digital ticket. I don't know how many people actually buy the TennoCon digital ticket specifically to get access to Barrow's entire shop, but I get the feeling that a lot more people will prefer to just buy the TennoCon digital ticket for a bunch of other things that are part of the TennoCon digital ticket. So that's just something you're going to have to keep in mind, okay? These items from Barrow's shop will also cost a bunch of ducats and a bunch of credits. So in order to get ducats, all you gotta do is crack a bunch of relics to get a bunch of prime parts, which you can then sell at the kiosk in the relay, with which you can then use to purchase Barracuteer's prime mods. You'll also need a bunch of credits as well. Now, when it comes to getting ducats, well, you could be just basically farming prime trash, which tends to give you somewhere between 15 and sometimes 45 ducats a piece. And then sometimes if you are like me, for example, and you've got pretty much every prime item necessary that you want, then even if you get a particularly rare item from your relic, you may just think, sack it, I'm going to sell it for ducats anyway, and you're going to get 100 ducats out of that, which is actually a pretty good deal. So that's basically how that's going to work. Also, as I'm about to mention, that particular rare item that you're getting from a relic, i.e. that particular rare prime part, might not be that valuable anyway. You'd probably be better off just using it for ducat fodder as well. WarFrame Market will also list a lot of the prime mods for around about 40 to 80 plat anyway, so when push comes to shove, you really should not be spending more than about 100 plat a piece anyway. So that's basically how I would go with that. Just check your listing as well before you make a decision, because I could be wrong on that range. I only had a look at a few prime mods myself. Alright, speaking of prime things, let's look at prime parts and relics. So prime parts have been relatively easier to get ever since the introduced relics. So for those who have been around since the old days, we used to be farming void towers in order to actually get our prime parts. and of course, due to the incredibly overly diluted drop table of void towers, prime parts were very expensive. These days, not so much, because relics allow you to massively reduce the drop table of your missions, so therefore it's a lot easier, basically because you're only farming for one of 6 things to get specifically the part that you want. So because of that, a lot of prime parts, their value has dropped significantly as a result of that. Now, of course, when it comes to getting a prime part, you must first get a relic in order to crack it. So most players do actually do these dedicated relic farms. I don't quite remember where they go to do dedicated relic farms. I think it's Hydron, but I could be wrong. So someone let me know in the comments below where the dedicated relic farm is, because I can't remember if it's meant to be Hydron in Sedna or if it's meant to be a node in Jupiter or something like that. But there is a specific node that a lot of people will end up going to in order to just constantly sit there and continue to kill enemies and then eventually get the relics that they want. I personally, though, don't really do relic farming all that much. Instead, I rely on what is called the Steel Path WarFrame Gacha, and that is by using a ton of steel essence that I have been acquiring over the many months between Prime WarFrame releases to then just churn and burn on the Steel Essence shop in order to get a bunch of relic packs. And I do end up getting quite a lot of relic packs, like 100 relic packs. That's why I'm actually swimming in relics myself that I will probably not crack anytime soon. So I have a lot of relics that I'm not going to be using at all. But yeah, just doing Steel Path dailies regularly enough does seem to yield me pretty high returns, to the point where like Cora Prime just came out and I already have like 6 to 8 relics for each of her parts, which hopefully should do the trick. We'll just have to see. You can also get relics from Syndicate's impacts as well, but keep in mind there is a cap on how many relic packs you can get from Syndicates, i.e., you know, between Warframe releases, because you can only max out your Syndicate standing so much before you basically don't really do anything after that. You could try and hoard the amount of medallions that you have, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but that is going to be something you have to keep an eye on. But with Teshin's shop, formerly Teshin's shop, I guess, with Teshin's Ghost shop, the Steel Essence shop, there is no cap on how much Steel Essence you can hold, which is why I find that the Steel Essence Warframe Gacha of Prime Pack openings is probably the most effective way to get a lot of relics out of that. Now, with Prime parts, as I said, I have observed that the trend of Prime part prices has been dropping quite heavily due to the fact that not only are void towers no longer a thing, but also just due to the very easier nature of getting a prime part from your relics. It seems like the noticeable trend now is that on the day that the new prime warframe or the new prime weapon comes out, their price per part is, or rather per set I guess, is around the several hundred plat. Somewhere between 200 to 300 plat, sometimes even 400 plat. Really depends on the warframe, really depends on the weapon. If it's a very highly sought after warframe like Cora Prime, it seems to be around about the 380 plat at the start. If it's a not so highly sought after warframe like Inaros Prime, then I would be surprised if the initial price was even in the triple digits, but it probably was, because, you know, people still want to buy Inaros Prime for some reason. So that's going to be what happens. But here's the thing, within half a day, the price just drops by 50%. And that pretty much says to me that like the first day, first minute, high demand for a new warframe or a new weapon, yeah, that's real. That's real, alright. But then, very quickly, the supply starts to catch up with that high demand, because again, it is so much easier to get the prime part that you want from the relics that you are cracking. So, because of that, the supply catches up, and therefore the price will quite easily normalize to around about 100 and something plat per set. Depending on the particular item you're looking for, depending on the particular prime warframe that you're looking for, you might even be able to get the entire set for less than 100 plat these days. I think Titania Prime is currently sitting at 80 plat. I haven't had a look yet, but that's probably something that would not surprise me at all. Alright, let's have a look at Syndicate Mods. Now obviously, if the Syndicate mod in question is from a syndicate that you've already joined, you absolutely should not need to trade plat for them. because obviously you'll get them through the syndicates themselves. Now, if you've already maxed out your syndicate level, which I think you have to in order to get the syndicate mod from the syndicate itself, then you can just rely on your syndicate dailies in order to just quickly get all of the syndicate standard that you need to get the specific syndicate mod that you want for your Warframe. And by syndicate mods, I am referring to a handful of Warframe quote-unquote augments, which may not require maximum standing, but then also the Warframe augments that I do believe require maximum standing from memory. Don't forget to also attach a syndicate sigil to your Warframe if you want to get even more syndicate standing really quickly. Now, there's also syndicate missions that will give you syndicate medallions. You will have to look around for those syndicate medallions. There are, of course, a handful of ways to easily find them. I personally don't look for them myself, but I just grab whichever one I see in my immediate presence as I continue to just churn and burn through the mission itself. But if you happen to have level 15 helmets, which I think would be a little bit unusual if you're still trying to find syndicate points, but maybe it isn't that unusual to have level 15 helmets at that particular moment in time, well, then you could try and use something like Golden Instinct. It does have a 20-second cooldown though, so, you know, just keep that in mind. Alternatively, you should use something like Loot Detector, and at that point you're basically using the same method that I've been using actually to get Void Plume Pinions, or Void Plume Downs and other various Void Plumes themselves, by basically breaking every single box in the room, and then anything that still sticks around on your Loot Detector is probably going to be a Syndicate Medallion, or it's potentially a rare cache, something like that. You'll only need 25 Syndicate standing to get a specific Syndicate mod, so just keep that in mind, because each Syndicate daily, when you've maxed out your Syndicate rank, I believe will give you somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000 standing. So if you do the math, that's around about 9,000 to 12,000 standing per day of Syndicate missions, and if you only need 25,000 Syndicate points, then 3 to 4 days tops of Syndicate dailies should do the trick. And obviously if you're actually going for the Syndicate medallions as well, you might be able to get it done in 2 to 3 days. That's pretty good. Alright, let's have a look at Arcanes. So for a long time, back in the good old days, question mark, Arcanes were specifically locked behind raids, and then they were specifically locked behind Tridolon hunts, okay? So naturally they were a very expensive item due to their high demand and low supply, especially things like Arcane Energize. I will be talking about Arcane Energize as an example because that is basically one of the most highly sought after items in Warframe history. The price used to be a couple of hundred plat for something like a single R0, i.e. just a single Arcane Energize. And back then you needed 10, so like people were paying somewhere between 1,000 to 2,000 plat for a maxed out R3 Arcane Energize, in the sense that you only needed 10 of them. But for those regular Arcanes, I would highly recommend checking the market value for each of them and then decide on the price that you're comfortable with based on that, because yeah, the prices kind of fluctuate a little bit as well, but these days the price does seem to have normalized to around about the, I think it's like 80 plat a piece for an Energize, and you do need 20 of them, so that's still around about 1,600 plat a pop for a maxed Arcane Energize, so that's actually still pretty damn pricey. Arcane Energize, the price for Arcane Energize has also been seemingly permanently potentially ravaged due to its availability sometimes as a Nightwave reward. So for example, I have a handful of spare Arcane Energizers. I could potentially sell that for a couple of hundred plat if I feel like it. So maybe I'll feel like it one day. But for the time being, like yeah, they're still available as a Nightwave reward from time to time. It just depends on the Nightwave itself, because it's specifically available as a Nightwave level award, not a Nightwave shop reward, obviously, so that's going to still maintain the price at a sort of decent amount, but it will probably still continue to increase the supply of Arcane Energize available. Also, the supply of Arcane Energize available is probably including when it was available for tokens from the Orphix Venom and Scar Spear shops. So at that particular moment, I do remember Arcane Energize prices absolutely plummeting to the floor when those particular operations were active, because you could just basically buy Arcane Energize from those shops, which basically meant that the supply was still there, but the demand pretty much just disappeared like overnight, which was kind of hilarious. But then as soon as those shops were gone, the demand slowly came back to a more normalized situation, where now you can spend about 1,600 plat to get a maxed R5 Arcane Energize. So that's of course going to be really, really interesting. Maybe they'll come back one day in an operation, we'll just have to see. I wouldn't hold out hope for it, but we'll just have to see. Until then, they're still available from Tridalon hunts, but they are still stupidly rare. There are also a bunch of other arcanes that are readily available from shops. Specifically, Zor and Kickgun arcanes, they are available from their respective shops, Hawk's Anvil and Rude Zud, as well as Operator arcanes that are available from Krill Onko and Little Duck. And then there's also other arcanes available from the Zariman, the newly available sort of mission hub space area. Now, they can be acquired not only from Cavallero's shop for Zariman Standing, but also from Thraxes and Angels, i.e. they're not just purchasable from the shop for standing, but they're also dropped from the enemies. And that is why these particular prices are not particularly high. If we have a look at, say, Malt Augmented, price per particular arcane is sitting around the 12 mark, which is really, really low. And again, that's because they're not only available as drops, they're also available for standing from Cavallero's shop, so I wouldn't really worry too much about trying to purchase them for about 100 Plat a piece. There are also the 6 weapon arcanes that are available from Steel Path missions. So we're talking about the 3 primary ones, Deadhead, Dexterity, and Merciless, and then of course the secondary variants for those arcanes. They are specifically dropped by Acolytes, and each Acolyte has a guaranteed drop rate of 100% for those arcanes. So the main question on your mind should be, which arcane is the Acolyte going to drop? That part is random, but the rest of it isn't. So that is why weapon arcanes are really, really cheap. To the point where I personally wouldn't even bother buying them. If you do Steel Path missions enough, you'll get a full set pretty bloody easily. And then finally, there's Rivens. Now this one I think is probably still an unregulated market, a truly capitalistic free market. Now, Fulren's Riven Evaluator bot used to be a thing, but it's basically been offline for a very, very long time, ever since like update 27.2 or something like that, which is a very long time ago. If you're looking to sell a Riven, or if you're looking to buy a Riven, I guess the only thing I could say is just keep looking around and see if a similar Riven is being sold, because then you can at least have a rough idea of how much you should be trying to charge, or how much you should be trying to ask for, or rather how much you should be willing to, give for that particular Riven. Take into account as well that there's a bunch of caveats involved. Not only are there RNG involved in the stat lines for those particular Rivens, but there's also RNG involved for the stats themselves, and then there's also the RNG of whether or not it's going to be like a 2 positive 1 negative, or a 3 positive only Riven, or hell, if it's going to be a 3 positive 1 negative Riven. But probably start off with a price check on that Riven and see if anyone is willing to buy it, or see if anyone's willing to sell it, or see if anyone's willing to either give you the light of day, something like that. With Rivens, every time someone asks me, oh, how much is this Riven going to cost, or how much can I sell this Riven for, I don't really know. I'm not a particularly well-versed Riven appraiser. I just have a look at what the market has, and if there's anything like close to what the market has, and then just try and take into account whatever differences there are. Because, for example, I think if there is a Riven that has like crit chance and crit damage, but also has like a negative fire rate, and then I try to compare it to the amount of Plat being charged for a Riven that has a damage, crit chance, crit damage, negative status chance, like Paris Prime Riven, like it's kind of really difficult to make that comparison, because they're probably still very differently valued Rivens, even though they do have at least 2 stats that are very similar. So it's really tricky in my opinion. But if someone is able to appraise Rivens pretty accurately and pretty easily, feel free to let me know in the comments how you managed to figure that out, because I would like to know myself. But that's pretty much it. Let me know what you think about all this in the comments below. Just, when you're getting scammed in Warframe, it's probably because you're just getting scammed by other players who are taking advantage of potentially your ignorance of the market to make more Plat out of you. So keep an eye on the market. It's turning very quickly into an economics lesson. Just keep an eye on the market. Just see what the market value of that particular item that you're looking for actually is, and then have a look at making your decisions accordingly. Sometimes you may just want to charge maybe you want to pay like, I don't know, 5% more than the market value to quickly get a particular item that you want. That's what I used to do in RuneScape. Or you want to charge 5% less than the market value in order to quickly sell what you're actually trying to sell. That's also what I did in RuneScape. But we don't exactly have a grand exchange. our closest thing to a grand exchange is the WarFrame market, so I would highly recommend using that to give you a rough idea of what the market value of that particular item actually is. But that's gonna be it. Hope you guys enjoyed this. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more WarFrame content. Hey D, maybe you should make a grand exchange in the game. That's a thought. Otherwise, until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye!